The flickering lights of Carroll Station had long since convinced Marcus Vale they were in a malfunction cycle, rather than an intentional pattern. Still, the rhythmic pulsing had a way of tricking the mind into believing there was a day-night cycle here, even when the nearest star was just another pinprick in the endless void beyond the viewport. He'd spent enough time staring at that darkness to know it wasn't looking back. Marcus moved through the cramped maintenance corridor, his boots making hollow sounds against the metal grating. The air tasted stale, recycled too many times through failing filtration systems. It carried the metallic tang of corroded pipes and the unmistakable scent of what he'd come to think of as old breath, the collective exhalations of too many people who had passed through these chambers over the decades. No one had bothered to maintain this section of Carroll Station for years. It was a forgotten ward, one of dozens in the sprawling maze of the station's lowest levels. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear, who needed to be forgotten. Perfect for Marcus. His quarters were little more than a repurposed storage bay, 8 by 10 feet of personal space. But it was his. The door, a manual hatch rather than the automatic entries in the upper levels, groaned as he twisted the wheel lock and pushed it open. Inside, a single light panel sputtered overhead, illuminating his sparse belongings. A cot bolted to the wall, a desk fashioned from salvaged metal, and tools scattered across every available surface. This was his life now, fixing what no one else bothered to fix, keeping this portion of the station operational enough to sustain life, if not comfort. The station administrators wouldn't waste resources on proper repairs for the lower wards, but they also couldn't afford to have entire sections depressurize. It created an unspoken arrangement. Marcus maintained what he could, and in return, no one asked questions about his presence or his past. He settled at his makeshift desk, sorting through the day's collection of damaged components. A faulty temperature regulator from Sector 12, 3 pressure sensors that triggered false alarms, a comms relay that intermittently dropped signals. Small problems no one up top cared about, but which made life unbearable for those dwelling in the forgotten corners of Carroll Station. The station's announcement system crackled to life, the sound distorted through the aged speakers in his sector. Attention all personnel. Curfew protocols now in effect. Intersector transit is restricted until 0600 hours. Remain in your designated areas. Security patrols will enforce compliance. This is not a drill. Marcus barely looked up from his work. Curfew announcements came like clockwork, another attempt to maintain the illusion of time passing normally in space. He'd long since stopped paying attention to the arbitrary divisions between day and night. Time flowed differently when you worked alone, measured only by tasks completed and problems solved. He was deep into the disassembly of the comms relay when it happened. A knock at his door. Not the mechanical thud of a maintenance bot, or the authoritative pounding of security. Just 3 soft, hesitant taps. Marcus froze. Soldering iron suspended midair. No one knocked on doors in the lower wards. No one visited, period. The first rule of survival here was simple. Keep to yourself. The second rule, equally important, never open your door during curfew. The knocking came again, slightly more urgent. He set down his tools and moved silently to the hatch, pressing his ear against the cold metal. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then he heard it, the soft sound of labored breathing, punctuated by what might have been a suppressed whimper. Every instinct told him to ignore it. Whatever was happening outside his door wasn't his problem. He'd survived this long by avoiding other people's troubles, by staying invisible. The third knock was barely a tap, weaker than the previous ones. Marcus closed his eyes, cursed under his breath, and began turning the wheel lock. The hatch swung open to reveal a hunched figure in the dimly lit corridor. A woman, no, not quite human, stood swaying slightly. One hand braced against the wall for support. Her skin had the iridescent quality of the Vathari species, shimmering faintly even in the poor light. Her eyes, large and entirely black, darted nervously behind him, scanning his quarters. "Please," she whispered, her voice raspy and strained. "Just one night. They'll move on by morning." She was trembling. Marcus realized. Whether from fear or cold, he couldn't tell. Her clothing, if it could be called that, consisted of tattered scraps that barely preserved modesty. Bruises bloomed across the exposed skin of her arms and collar. The iridescence there dulled to a sickly gray. He should close the door. Whatever trouble she was in would become his if he let her inside. Station regulations were clear about harboring unregistered visitors, especially non-humans in the human sectors. The penalties were severe. "Please," she repeated, and this time he saw the desperation in those alien eyes. Marcus stepped aside, gesturing her in with a quick jerk of his head. "Quickly." She slipped past him, moving with a grace that belied her apparent exhaustion. Marcus secured the hatch, spinning the lock mechanism with practiced efficiency. When he turned, she was standing in the center of his quarters, arms wrapped protectively around herself, still shivering. "Sit," he said, pointing to his cot. "Before you fall down." She obeyed, perching on the edge of the thin mattress, as though afraid to disturb anything. Up close, Marcus could see the extent of her injuries, not just bruises, but a pattern of small burns along her forearms, and a partially healed cut above one eye. Without a word, he pulled a thermal foil blanket from a storage compartment and held it out to her. She stared at it for a moment before reaching out with tentative fingers to take it. "Thank you," she murmured, wrapping the crinkly material around her shoulders. "It's not much," Marcus replied, turning away to give her privacy. He busied himself at his workbench, pretending to organize tools while she adjusted the blanket. "It's more than anyone else has offered," she said. Marcus grunted in acknowledgement. "You have a name?" "Sella. Marcus Vale." He didn't ask what she was running from or who they were. Some questions were better left unasked in this part of the station. "You're not afraid?" Sella asked after a moment of silence. "Of what?" "Me. What might happen if they find me here. What I might do." Marcus turned to face her, leaning back against his workbench. "Should I be?" She held his gaze, then slowly shook her head. "No. But most humans would be." "I'm not most humans." He gestured vaguely at his surroundings. "Most humans don't live like this by choice." That earned the slightest quirk of her lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "Neither do most Vithari." The tension in the room eased slightly. Marcus fetched a canister of water from his meager supplies and offered it to her. She accepted it gratefully, drinking in small, measured sips as though afraid it might be taken away. "You need clothes," he said bluntly. Sella glanced down at her tattered garments, then back at him with a guarded expression. "Not mine," Marcus clarified. "But I can find something." He moved to a storage locker and rummaged through its contents, eventually producing a faded jumpsuit. It was too large, designed for human proportions, but it was clean and intact. "It's station issue. Old maintenance uniform." He held it out to her. "Better than what you've got." Sella set the water aside and took the jumpsuit, examining it with something like wonder. "You're just giving this to me?" Marcus shrugged. "You need it more than I do." She swallowed hard. "Thank you." He turned his back again, giving her privacy to change. The soft rustle of fabric filled the small space as Sella shed her rags and pulled on the jumpsuit. When he heard her clear her throat, he turned to find her standing uncertainly, the garment hanging loosely on her slender frame. She'd rolled the sleeves and pant legs up to accommodate her shorter limbs. "Better," Marcus said with an approving nod. "Why are you helping me?" The question came suddenly, her voice sharp with suspicion. "What do you want in return?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Nothing. Everyone wants something. Not me. Not tonight." He moved past her to adjust the environmental controls, raising the ambient temperature a few degrees. You're cold. The Vathari have lower body temperatures than humans, right? Sella blinked, surprised by the question. Yes. How did you know that? I read. Marcus didn't elaborate that his reading material consisted largely of technical manuals and species compatibility guides for station systems. Different species required different environmental settings, and knowing these details had been part of his job once, in another life. He activated a small hot plate on his workbench and placed a container over it. Hungry? Sella nodded hesitantly. It's just universal rations, he warned. Synthesized protein soup. Tastes like nothing, but it's nutritionally complete. I know what UR is, she said softly. It's what they feed us in the processing centers. Marcus stilled, his back to her. Processing centers. The euphemism for the holding facilities where trafficked beings were kept before being sold to whatever fate awaited them. He'd heard rumors of such places existing in the darker corners of the station, but had never sought to confirm them. Another survival tactic. Don't look too closely at the shadows. You escaped, he said, not a question. Yes, just that single word, laden with unspoken horrors. Marcus didn't press for details. Instead, he stirred the warming soup and found a relatively clean cup. When the liquid began to steam, he poured a portion and brought it to Sella. Careful, it's hot. She cupped her hands around the vessel, seeming to take as much comfort from its warmth as from the prospect of food. Marcus watched as she blew gently across the surface before taking a tentative sip. You made this? She asked. A bitter smile twisted his lips. In a manner of speaking. Sella looked up at him questioningly. I was part of the team that designed the synthesis process for UR, Marcus explained. Universal rations. The miracle food that keeps millions alive across the system while tasting like absolutely nothing. You're an engineer? Now I'm just a guy who fixes things. He gestured around his small quarters. Small things. Things no one else cares about. Sella took another sip of the soup. Sometimes small things make all the difference. They lapsed into silence as she ate. The only sounds the hum of the station's life support systems and the occasional ping of cooling metal. When Sella finished, Marcus took the empty cup and set it aside. You should rest, he said. Take the cot, He glanced around the confined space, realizing he had nowhere else to go. We can share, Sella suggested, then quickly added, just to sleep. The cot is small, but we can make it work. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. I'll take the wall side. He dimmed the lights to their lowest setting, plunging the room into near darkness relieved only by the faint glow of indicator lights on various pieces of equipment. Marcus settled onto the cot first, pressing his back against the cold wall to make as much room as possible. After a moment's hesitation, Sella lay down beside him, her back to his chest, careful to maintain a sliver of space between them. The thermal blanket crinkled as she adjusted it to cover them both. Is it always this quiet? She whispered. No, Marcus replied. Usually there's the sound of systems failing in new and interesting ways. He felt rather than saw her smile. I meant people, voices, movement. I don't get many visitors. By choice? Marcus was silent for a long moment. Yes, he finally said. By choice. Sella didn't respond immediately. When she did, her voice was barely audible. I miss rain, the sound of it, on Vathar. The rainy season lasted half the year. I used to fall asleep to that sound every night. Marcus reached past her to tap a command into the small console beside the cot. The room's aged speakers crackled to life, filling the space with the gentle patter of simulated rainfall. Sella went very still. How did you... Environmental Sound Library, Marcus explained. For sleep assistance. Standard in all quarters. Though most people in this sector don't know how to access it anymore. She didn't thank him this time. But he felt the tension slowly leave her body as the familiar sound washed over them. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened and slowed. Sleep had claimed her. Perhaps for the first time in days. Marcus lay awake much longer, listening to the artificial rain and the very real sound of Sella's breathing. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone in the darkness, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. When Marcus woke, the artificial rain had stopped, replaced by the ambient hum of the station. He was alone on the cot. For a moment, he wondered if he'd dreamed the entire encounter. But then, he spotted Sella standing by the small viewport, staring out at the stars. She'd found his comb somewhere and had attempted to bring order to her tangled hair. The jumpsuit, despite being too large, looked less ridiculous in the light of a new cycle. She'd fashioned a belt from what appeared to be a length of wire, cinching the excess fabric at her waist. "You're still here," he said, his voice rough with sleep. Sella turned, regarding him with those large, dark eyes. "Did you expect me to be gone? Most people take what they need and leave." "I'm not most people." She echoed his words from the night before, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Marcus sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "No, I suppose you're not." He moved to the small sink in the corner and splashed water on his face, trying to clear the fog of sleep. When he straightened, Sella was watching him with an unreadable expression. "What?" he asked. "You look different when you sleep," she said. "Less guarded." Marcus didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. Instead, he checked the time display on his console. "Curfew lifted 20 minutes ago. You should be able to move freely now, if you want to go." "Go where?" The question hung in the air between them, simple yet impossibly complex. Marcus busied himself with preparing a morning ration, more of the flavorless protein soup, this time cold. He poured 2 portions without asking and handed one to Sella. "Thank you," she said, accepting the cup. "For everything." Marcus nodded once, uncomfortable with her gratitude. He drank his portion quickly, barely tasting it, then set the cup aside. "I need to work. There's a faulty life support regulator in Sector 15 that won't fix itself. Can I come with you?" The question seemed to surprise Sella as much as it did Marcus. He stared at her. "Why would you want to do that?" Sella looked down at her cup. "Because I have nowhere else to go and—" She hesitated. "And I feel safe with you." The words struck Marcus like a physical blow. Safe. When was the last time anyone had associated that word with him? "It's dangerous out there for you," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Especially with me. I'm not exactly welcome in the upper sectors." "More dangerous than staying here alone?" Sella countered. "What if they come looking while you're gone?" She had a point. If whoever was pursuing her managed to track her to this sector, she'd be trapped in his quarters with nowhere to run. "Fine," Marcus conceded. "But stay close and don't draw attention." He gathered his tools into a worn satchel and checked the corridor before letting Sella exit first. The lower ward was stirring with the minimal activity it ever saw. A few shadowy figures moving between quarters. The occasional maintenance bot whirring along its programmed path. No one paid them any particular attention, which was exactly how Marcus preferred it. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors in silence, Marcus leading the way with the confidence of someone who had memorized every junction and access point. Sella kept pace just behind his right shoulder, her footsteps nearly silent compared to his. "How do you know where you're going?" she asked, as they passed through a particularly complex intersection of passages. "I've been here a long time," Marcus replied. "And I've fixed something in almost every sector." "How long?" Marcus paused at a security checkpoint, withdrawing a battered ID card from his pocket. He swiped it through the reader, which blinked yellow before reluctantly turning green. The barrier slid open with a hydraulic hiss. 7 years, he said as they passed through, give or take a few months. Alone? Yes. They entered a service tunnel, the ceiling so low that Marcus had to stoop slightly. The lighting here was even worse than in the residential areas, with entire sections dark where the power had failed. Why? Sella pressed. Why what? Why alone? Why here? You're obviously skilled. You could work anywhere. Marcus stopped so abruptly that Sella nearly collided with him. He turned to face her, his expression hard in the dim light. Some questions are better left unasked, he said quietly. Sella met his gaze without flinching. And some need answering, whether we want to hear them or not. For a long moment, they stood in stalemate. Then Marcus sighed, the tension leaving his shoulders. I made a mistake, he said. A calculation error in a life support system design. 19 people died when a section depressurized. They called it an accident. But I knew better. He looked away. So I disappeared, came here, where no one asks questions and no one cares who you were before. Sella was silent for several heartbeats. Then, gently, she placed a hand on his arm. Thank you for telling me. Marcus nodded once, unable to meet her eyes. He turned and continued down the tunnel, and after a moment, Sella followed. They emerged into Sector 15, which was marginally better maintained than Marcus's home sector, but still showed clear signs of neglect. The life support regulator was housed in a recessed panel near a junction of corridors. Marcus knelt before it and began removing the access plate. Hand me the diagnostic scanner, he said, holding out a hand without looking up. Sella rummaged in his tool bag and placed the device in his palm. Marcus raised an eyebrow, surprised she'd found the right tool on her first try. I worked maintenance on the transport that brought me here, she explained, noting his expression. Before they realized I had other marketable skills. The way she said it made Marcus's jaw tighten. He focused on the regulator, connecting the scanner and reading the error codes that flashed across its small screen. Pressure differential sensor is misaligned, he muttered. Easy fix. As he worked, Sella kept watch, her gaze constantly scanning the surrounding area. Her alertness reminded Marcus of prey animals he'd seen in nature documentaries, always aware of potential predators. Who are you running from? He asked, his hands still busy with the regulator. Sella tensed. I thought some questions were better left unasked. Fair enough. Marcus adjusted a component inside the unit, then tested the connection. But if they come looking, I should know what to expect. Sella was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. When she did, her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Syndicate traffickers. I was part of a shipment from the Outer Rim, destined for private buyers in the core systems. We stopped here for refueling and crew rotation. She paused. There was a moment, just a moment, when the guard was distracted. I took it. Marcus nodded, continuing his work on the regulator. How many others like you? 17 on our transport. Hundreds, maybe thousands moving through the system at any given time. And no one stops it. It wasn't a question. Some try, Sella said. There are organizations, individuals who fight against it. But the demand is too high. The profit's too great. She looked away. And most people don't want to know what happens in the shadows of their comfortable worlds. Marcus closed the access panel and stood, brushing dust from his knees. Regulators fixed. Sector 15 gets to breathe easy for another day. Is that all you do? Sella asked as they gathered his tools. Fix things that break? Someone has to. But why you? Why not let the station assign proper maintenance crews? Marcus led the way back toward the service tunnel. Because they won't. Upper management decided years ago that the lower wards weren't worth the resources. They'd rather let them deteriorate until they can justify sealing them off entirely. With people still living here? They'd be relocated, Marcus said, his tone making it clear what he thought of that prospect. To worker housing or processing centers, depending on their status. Sella fell silent as they re-entered the narrow tunnel. This time, Marcus noticed she kept glancing nervously behind them, as though expecting pursuit. "We're fine," he assured her. "Security cameras in this section have been dead for years. I made sure of it." "It's not just security I'm worried about," Sella replied. "The traffickers have people everywhere, including station staff, eyes looking for escapees, ears listening for rumors." "No one's looking in the lower wards," Marcus said. "That's the whole point of this place. It's where people go to be forgotten." They had just reached another junction when voices echoed from around the corner ahead. Marcus reacted instantly, pulling Sella into a recessed maintenance alcove barely large enough for one person. They stood pressed together, hardly daring to breathe as two station security officers passed by. "A waste of time," one was saying. "No one down here has seen anything. They barely see daylight, let alone escaped cargo." "Orders are orders," the second replied. "Full sweep of all sectors, top to bottom. Captain says this one's high value. Client's offering a bonus for recovery. Client can go vacuum themselves. I didn't sign on to be a slave catcher." "Keep your voice down. That kind of talk gets people disappeared." Their voices faded as they moved farther down the corridor. Marcus felt Sella trembling against him, her face buried against his chest. He kept one arm around her shoulders, his other hand still gripping his tool bag. "They're gone," he whispered after a full minute of silence. Sella didn't move immediately. When she did step back, her eyes were wide with fear. "They're looking for me. They're searching all sectors." "They won't find you," Marcus said with more confidence than he felt. "You don't understand. They won't stop. The client they mentioned, it's someone important, someone with influence. They'll tear this station apart if they have to." Marcus considered their options. His quarters were no longer safe, not with active searches underway. They needed somewhere else to hide, somewhere even the most determined searchers wouldn't look. "Come on," he said, taking Sella's hand. "I know a place." He led her through a series of increasingly narrow and neglected passages, some so tight they had to turn sideways to squeeze through. They descended 2 levels via emergency ladder wells, bypassing the monitored lifts entirely. The air grew noticeably colder and staler as they went deeper into the station's forgotten underbelly. Finally, they reached a section where the lighting had failed completely. Marcus produced a small flashlight from his bag, illuminating their path through the darkness. "Where are we?" Sella whispered, her breath fogging in the chill air. "Maintenance sublevel D," Marcus replied. "It was flooded during a coolant leak 5 years ago. They evacuated it, sealed it off, and wrote it off their maps. I found a way in while tracing power conduits." They arrived at what appeared to be a dead end, but Marcus pressed his palm against a specific panel, which yielded under pressure. Behind it was a manual override, which he activated with practiced ease. A section of wall slid back with a grinding sound, revealing a chamber beyond. Marcus gestured for Sella to enter first, then followed, sealing the entrance behind them. He played his flashlight around the space, revealing what had once been a hydroponic garden. The growing beds were long empty, the water circulation systems dry, but the room was intact and, crucially, unmonitored. "Welcome to the garden," Marcus said. "My other home." Sella moved slowly through the space, touching the empty planting troughs with something like reverence. "Plants grew here?" "Food crops, mostly supplemental to the synthesized rations." Marcus set his bag down and activated a small power cell he'd apparently stashed there earlier. A portable heater hummed to life, and a few emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in a soft blue glow. "You've prepared this place," Sella observed. "Everyone needs a backup plan." Marcus began unpacking supplies from hidden compartments around the room: water containers, packaged rations, even a few rough blankets. "We can stay here until the searches move on." "And if they don't?" Marcus paused in his preparations. "Then we'll figure something else out." Sela studied him, her head tilted slightly. Why are you doing this? Risking yourself for me? You barely know me. It was a question Marcus had been asking himself since he first opened his door to her. The answer, when it came, surprised him with its simplicity. Because no one else would, he said. And because I've spent 7 years fixing things that break, while ignoring the things that really matter. Sela moved closer, her dark eyes reflecting the blue emergency lights. And what really matters, Marcus Vale? People, he said softly. Connections. The things I've been running from since I let 19 people die because of my mistake. You didn't let them die, Sela corrected gently. You made an error. There's a difference. Not to the dead, but to the living. She placed a hand on his chest, over his heart. To you, and to me. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that Marcus found himself without words. Sela seemed to understand his silence, withdrawing her hand after a moment. We should rest, she said. Conserve our strength. They arranged the blankets into makeshift bedding on the floor of the abandoned garden. The heater provided enough warmth to make the space tolerable, though their breath still fogged in the cool air. As they had the night before, they lay side by side, this time facing each other in the dim blue light. Tell me about Vathar, Marcus said, wanting to fill the silence with something other than thoughts of pursuit. Sela's expression softened. It's beautiful, mostly oceans, with archipelagos of floating islands that drift with the currents. The sky is always changing, storms gathering and breaking, sunlight filtering through clouds in great golden shafts. You miss it. Every day. She traced patterns on the blanket between them. My family lived on one of the smaller islands in the eastern chain. We harvested sea kelp and raised flying fish in the shallows. It was a simple life, but good. What happened? Sela's fingers stilled. Raiders came. They target remote communities, knowing central authorities won't respond in time. They took a dozen of us, young, healthy specimens with desirable traits. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. I was 17. Marcus reached out hesitantly, covering her hand with his own. I'm sorry. It was 8 years ago, Sela said. I've been passed from owner to owner, transport to transport, used for whatever skills were deemed valuable at the time. And now? Now I'm nothing. Property that escaped its cage. She met his eyes. A problem to be solved. No, Marcus said firmly. You're Sela of the Eastern Chain, kelp harvester, flying fish raiser, rain listener, and you're free. A single tear traced a silvery path down her iridescent cheek. Am I? Yes, Marcus insisted. For as long as I can help make it so. She turned her hand beneath his, interlacing their fingers. Why did you come here, Marcus? To this station? This forgotten place? I told you. I was running from my mistake. There's more, Sela said. I can see it in your eyes when you talk about it. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, their joined hands the only point of contact between them. The 19 people who died, he finally said. One of them was my sister, Emily. Sela's fingers tightened around his. She was visiting me at the research station where I worked, Marcus continued, the words coming easier now that he'd started. Her first time off-world, so proud of her big brother, the brilliant engineer designing life support systems for the next generation of space habitats. He closed his eyes. I was showing her around when the section depressurized, the emergency bulkheads activated, sealing off the affected area, with her on the wrong side. Oh, Marcus! I watched her die through the viewport. Couldn't do anything to stop it. His voice was hollow. The investigation cleared me of direct responsibility, called it a cascading system failure. But I knew the truth. I'd overlooked a critical flaw in the pressure regulation algorithms, a flaw I should have caught. So you punished yourself, Sela said softly, exiled yourself here. It seemed fitting. living in a place that could kill me at any moment due to system failures, spending my days preventing those failures for others. Sella moved closer, until their foreheads nearly touched. "Penance," she whispered. "Something like that." They fell silent. The hum of the heater and the distant sounds of the station systems, the only noises in their hidden sanctuary. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them both, their hands still intertwined as they slept. Marcus dreamed of pressure alarms and vacuum, and his sister's face pressed against a viewport, mouth open in a silent scream. He woke with a start, heart racing, to find Sella watching him with concern. "Bad dreams?" she asked. "The usual," he replied, sitting up and running a hand through his hair. "What time is it?" Sella shrugged. "Hard to tell down here. Your chronometer says it's been 8 hours since we arrived." Marcus checked the small device on his wrist, confirming her statement. "We should move soon. Check if the searches have moved on. And if they haven't, then we stay put a while longer." He reached for his water container and took a drink before offering it to Sella. "We have supplies for a few days." She accepted the water. "And then what? We can't hide forever." "No," Marcus agreed. "But we can buy time to figure out our next move." "Which is?" Marcus hesitated. He hadn't thought beyond keeping Sella safe in the immediate term. The future, anything beyond the next few days, was a luxury he hadn't allowed himself to consider for years. "I don't know," he admitted. "What do you want to do?" The question seemed to catch Sella off guard. "What I want," she repeated the words as though testing an unfamiliar concept. "I want to go home. But that's impossible. The traffickers know who I am, where I'm from. They'd find me again." "So somewhere new," Marcus suggested. "Somewhere they wouldn't look." "With what?" "I have no credits, no identification, no travel documents." Sella's voice held no self-pity, just a clear-eyed assessment of her situation. "And you? What do you want, Marcus?" He looked away. "I stopped wanting things a long time ago." "I don't believe that." Before Marcus could respond, a faint sound reached them, the hiss of a pressure door opening somewhere in the sublevel. They froze, eyes locked in shared alarm. "Someone's here," Sella whispered. Marcus moved swiftly, shutting off the heater and dimming the emergency lights to their lowest setting. He gestured for Sella to gather their things, while he pressed his ear to the hidden entrance of their sanctuary, listening intently. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, accompanied by the static crackle of communication devices. Multiple people, moving with purpose. Not the casual patrol of regular security, but something more focused. "They're searching the sublevel," Marcus breathed, barely audible. Sella's eyes widened with fear, but she continued packing their supplies with quick, efficient movements. "How did they find this place? You said it was sealed off, forgotten." "Someone must have tracked us," Marcus replied, mind racing through possibilities. "Security cameras we missed, or—" He stopped, a cold realization settling in his gut. "Or they're tracking your biosignature." "What?" "Traffickers often implant trackers in their cargo," Marcus explained, the words bitter in his mouth. "Usually subcutaneous, near major blood vessels for power. Standard procedure for high-value acquisitions." Understanding dawned in Sella's expression, followed by horror. Her hand went to her neck, fingers tracing a small, raised scar just below her ear. "They did something when they first took me. An injection. I thought it was just to sedate me, but—" The footsteps outside grew louder. They were running out of time. "We need to move," Marcus said, gathering the last of their supplies. "There's another way out, through the hydroponics irrigation system. It connects to the water reclamation center one level up." He led Sella to the far corner of the garden, where a large drainage grate was set into the floor. With quick, practiced movements, He released the locking mechanism and lifted the heavy metal cover. "Down there," he instructed, pointing to the dark shaft below. "There's a service ladder. I'll follow right behind you." Sella hesitated only briefly before lowering herself into the opening. The shaft was narrow, barely wide enough for their shoulders, and descended into darkness that even their small light struggled to penetrate. Marcus followed, pulling the grate closed above them with a soft clang. They climbed down in silence, the only sounds their breathing and the occasional scrape of boots against metal rungs. The air grew damper as they descended, carrying the chemical smell of water purification compounds. After what seemed an eternity of climbing in darkness, they reached the bottom of the shaft. A narrow horizontal tunnel stretched before them, just tall enough to crouch walk through. Water trickled along its floor, soaking their boots as they moved. "Where does this lead?" Sella whispered. "Filtration system," Marcus replied. "From there, we can access the main water reclamation center. It's automated, minimal staff. We can surface there and figure out our next move." They made slow progress through the tunnel, hunched over to avoid hitting their heads on the low ceiling. The sound of flowing water grew louder as they advanced, eventually opening into a larger chamber filled with massive filtration tanks. Catwalks crisscrossed the space above the tanks, with control stations positioned at regular intervals. Marcus signaled for Sella to wait while he climbed an access ladder to one of the catwalks. He peered cautiously around the filtration center, confirming it was empty of personnel before waving Sella up to join him. "We're in the auxiliary filtration system," he explained as she climbed up beside him. "Main reclamation center is through that passage." He pointed to a doorway across the chamber. "From there, we can access the central hub of the station, lose ourselves in the crowds." "Won't they be watching the central areas?" Sella asked. "Yes, but they'll be looking for someone hiding, moving furtively. Not two maintenance workers going about their business in plain sight." Marcus opened his tool bag and withdrew a second jumpsuit, identical to the one Sella wore. "Put this on over yours. Double layers will help hide your body temperature from thermal scanners." Sella complied, shrugging into the additional garment. Marcus did the same, then produced 2 caps with the station maintenance insignia. "Keep your head down, tool bag visible," he instructed. "Walk like you belong, like you've got a job to do and you're slightly annoyed about having to do it." A ghost of a smile touched Sella's lips. "I remember that walk. Every maintenance worker in the galaxy has it." "Exactly." Marcus adjusted his cap. "Ready?" Sella nodded, squaring her shoulders. "Ready." They crossed the filtration chamber and passed through the doorway into the main reclamation center. Unlike the auxiliary system, this area was fully operational, with automated equipment humming efficiently and status monitors glowing green across control panels. A few technicians moved about their tasks, paying little attention to the newcomers. Marcus led the way with confident strides, nodding casually to the other workers as they passed. Sella matched his pace, keeping her gaze focused on the floor a few feet ahead, as he'd instructed. They reached the main exit without incident and passed through into a busy corridor. The difference was immediate and jarring. After days in the dim, quiet lower wards, the noise and light of the central station was almost overwhelming. People of various species hurried past on unknown errands. The public address system periodically announced arrivals and departures, and the air carried the mingled scents of food vendors and too many bodies in too little space. Marcus felt Sella tense beside him, overwhelmed by the sensory input. He placed a steadying hand on her arm, guiding her through the press of bodies toward a less crowded side passage. "Breathe," he murmured. "Just breathe. We're just 2 more faces in the crowd." They had almost reached the relative quiet of the side passage when Marcus spotted them. 3 security officers accompanied by a tall figure in civilian clothes. The civilian's attire was too fine for the station, marking him instantly as an outsider. Someone with money and influence. A client, perhaps, come to reclaim lost property personally. Marcus reacted without thinking, pulling Sella into an alcove housing a public communication terminal. He positioned himself between her and the approaching group, blocking their line of sight with his body. "Don't turn around," he whispered. "They're coming this way." Sella went rigid against him, her breathing shallow. "How many?" "4, 3 security, 1 civilian. The civilian looks important." "That's him," Sella whispered, her voice tight with fear. "My buyer. The one who paid for me." The group was drawing nearer, the civilian scanning the crowds with cold, assessing eyes. In moments, they would pass directly by the alcove. "Kiss me," Marcus said suddenly. "What?" "Public displays of affection make people uncomfortable. They'll look away." He turned to face her. "Trust me." Sella hesitated only briefly, before rising on her toes to press her lips to his. Marcus cradled her face in his hands, angling their bodies so his back was to the passing group, shielding her from view. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but as the footsteps drew closer, Sella's arms circled his waist, drawing him nearer. Time seemed to slow as they stood locked in embrace, the busy station fading to background noise around them. Marcus was acutely aware of every point of contact between them, her hands at his waist, her lips soft against his, the slight tremble in her frame that gradually steadied as the moment extended. When they finally parted, the search party had passed. Sella's dark eyes searched his face, a question in their depths that had nothing to do with pursuit or escape. "They're gone," Marcus said, his voice rougher than he intended. Sella nodded, not moving away. "That was quick thinking. Old espionage trick." He managed a crooked smile. "Read it in a book somewhere." A shadow of disappointment crossed her features before she stepped back, breaking the contact between them. "Where to now?" Marcus forced his mind back to their situation. "We need to get off this station. Find transport to somewhere they won't look for you." "With what credits? What documentation?" Sella's practical concerns from earlier remained unsolved. "I have some savings," Marcus said. "Not much, but enough for basic passage on a cargo hauler. Maybe, as for documentation," he grimaced. "I know someone who might help, but it's risky." "Riskier than staying here with him looking for me?" Sella gestured in the direction the search party had gone. "Point taken." Marcus checked the corridor before leading them out of the alcove. "We need to get to level 3, commercial sector. My contact operates out of a repair shop there." They moved through the station with careful efficiency, using service corridors where possible to avoid the main thoroughfares. Twice they had to duck into shops or alcoves to avoid security patrols. But the disguise of maintenance workers proved effective. Busy, anonymous figures that drew little attention. The commercial sector was a stark contrast to both the pristine upper levels and the neglected lower wards. Here, a vibrant chaos reigned, with shops and stalls crammed into every available space. The official station architecture was nearly hidden beneath layers of personalization. Bright fabrics, holographic advertisements, strings of lights, and the occasional unauthorized structural modification. Marcus guided Sella to a narrow shop wedged between a food vendor and a parts dealer. The sign above the door simply read, "Repairs," in 3 different languages, with no indication of what might be repaired inside. He rapped on the doorframe in a distinct pattern before entering, Sella close behind. The interior was cluttered with technological detritus, partially disassembled devices, components in various states of repair, and tools scattered across every surface. A counter bisected the small space, behind which sat a heavy-set human woman with a magnifying visor pushed up onto her forehead. "Closed," she said without looking up from the circuit board she was soldering. "Come back tomorrow." "Hello, Lena," Marcus replied. The woman's head snapped up, eyes widening in recognition. "Marcus Vale. I heard you were dead." "Not yet." He approached the counter. "We need help." Lena's gaze shifted to Sella, taking in her ill-fitting jumpsuit and tense posture. Understanding dawned in her weathered features. "Ah, the missing Vithari everyone's looking for." She sighed heavily. "You always did have a talent for finding trouble. Vale." "Can you help us or not?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice low. Lena studied them both for a long moment, then reached beneath the counter and pressed something. The subtle hum of a privacy field activated around the shop, and the front door lock engaged with an audible click. "What kind of help?" she asked. "Documentation, travel papers, enough to get off station without raising flags." Lena laughed, a short, harsh sound. "In the middle of a station-wide search? For a high-value fugitive with a tracker?" Sella's hand went instinctively to the scar on her neck. "So you know about that," Marcus said. "Everyone with ears knows about that," Lena retorted. "The bounty's been broadcast on all the shadow channels. Your friend here is worth a small fortune to someone very powerful." "Can you remove it?" Sella asked suddenly. "The tracker." Lena's eyebrows rose. "I fix communication relays and navigation systems. Honey, I don't do wetware." "But you know someone who does," Marcus pressed. "You know everyone in this sector, Lena. That's why I came to you." The older woman sighed again, removing her visor entirely and rubbing her eyes. "This is going to cost you, Vale, more than you've got. I'd wager. Name your price." "It's not about credits." Lena leaned forward, dropping her voice despite the privacy field. "It's about risk, the kind of risk that gets people disappeared. Or worse." "I know about risk," Marcus said quietly. "I've been living with it for 7 years." Lena studied him, then Sella, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded once. "Wait here. Don't touch anything." She disappeared through a door behind the counter, leaving them alone in the cluttered shop. Sella moved closer to Marcus, her shoulder brushing his. "Can we trust her?" she whispered. "Lena's the closest thing I have to a friend on this station," Marcus replied. "She helped me disappear when I first arrived. If anyone can help us now, it's her." Sella nodded, though uncertainty lingered in her eyes. They waited in tense silence, the minutes stretching painfully. When Lena finally returned, she carried a small case and wore a grim expression. "My contact can see you," she said, "for the tracker removal. But there are conditions." "What conditions?" Marcus asked. "First, it happens now. No delay, no second chances." Lena set the case on the counter. "Second, you leave immediately after. My friend arranges passage on a freighter departing in 3 hours. Third," she fixed Marcus with a hard stare. "You never contact me again? This never happened. I never saw either of you." The severity of her terms hung in the air between them. Marcus glanced at Sella, who gave a small nod. "Agreed," he said. Lena handed him a data chip. "Coordinates for the medical contact. Memorize them, then destroy the chip. And Vale?" Her expression softened slightly. "Be careful. The people looking for her won't stop just because she's off station." "I know." Marcus pocketed the chip. "Thank you, Lena." She waved away his thanks. "Don't thank me. Just go. And don't get caught or we're all dead." They left the shop through a back exit that opened into a service corridor, once again relying on their maintenance worker disguises to move through the station unnoticed. The coordinates led them to the medical sector, but not to any official facility. Instead, they found themselves outside an unmarked door in a quiet side corridor. Marcus knocked according to the pattern Lena had shown him. After a moment, the door slid open just enough to reveal a single, dark eye studying them. "Lena sent us," Marcus said quietly. The eye blinked once, and the door opened wider to admit them. They stepped into what appeared to be a small, private medical suite, clean and well-equipped, but clearly operating outside official channels. The person who had opened the door was a tall, thin human with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore medical scrubs and an expression of perpetual suspicion. "I am Dr. Verma," she said, her accent crisp and precise. "Lena says you have a tracking device to remove?" Sella nodded, touching the scar on her neck. "Here, subcutaneous, I think." Dr. Verma gestured to an examination table. "Sit. Let me scan first." Sella complied, perching nervously on the edge of the table while the doctor retrieved a handheld scanner. Marcus stood nearby, unwilling to leave Sella's side. The scanner hummed as Dr. Verma passed it over Sella's neck and shoulder. A small display showed a real-time image of the tissue beneath the skin, revealing a tiny metallic object nestled against her carotid artery. The doctor murmured. "Standard trafficker model. Draws power from blood flow. Transmits location data on encrypted frequency." She set the scanner aside. "Simple to remove, but not without risk. It has an anti-tampering feature. Try to remove it incorrectly. It releases a toxin." Sella paled. "What kind of toxin?" "The fatal kind." Dr. Verma's bluntness was oddly reassuring. A professional stating facts rather than offering false comfort. "But I have removed many like this. The trick is to freeze the toxin reservoir first, then extract the entire unit intact." "Have you ever failed?" Marcus asked. Dr. Verma met his gaze. "No, but there is always a first time for everything." She turned back to Sella. "I need your consent. Understanding the risks." Sella straightened her shoulders. "Do it. I'd rather die free than live as property." The doctor nodded once, apparently satisfied with this answer. She prepared a series of instruments on a tray beside the examination table, including what appeared to be a localized cryogenic applicator. "You should wait outside," she told Marcus. "Small procedure, but private." "I'm staying," Marcus replied firmly. "If that's all right with Sella." Sella reached for his hand, squeezing it once. "Stay, please." Dr. Verma shrugged. "As you wish. Lie back, please. This will be uncomfortable but should not be painful. I will use local anesthetic." The procedure took less than 20 minutes, though to Marcus it seemed to stretch for hours. He watched as Dr. Verma worked with practiced precision, first numbing the area, then applying the cryo tool to freeze the tiny device before making a small incision and extracting it with specialized forceps. The device, once removed, looked innocuous. A metallic cylinder, no larger than a grain of rice, with almost invisible filaments that had anchored it to Sella's tissue. "There," Dr. Verma said, placing the tracker in a sealed container. "It will continue to transmit from here, making them think you are still on the station for a while." She applied a dermal seal to the small wound on Sella's neck. "Keep dry for 12 hours. After that, no restrictions." Sella touched the sealed incision gingerly. "Thank you." "No need. Lena has paid your debt." Dr. Verma handed Marcus a small package. "Travel documents, basic identity chips, enough to pass cursory inspection." She gave them both a stern look. "Now go. Your transport leaves soon." They thanked her again and departed quickly, following the directions to the cargo docks included with their documentation. The forged identity chips designated them as assistant engineers, contracted for a 3-month tour on the freighter Horizon's Edge, bound for the Outer Rim colonies. The cargo docks were busy with pre-departure activities, loaders moving supplies, crew checking manifests, security performing routine inspections. Marcus and Sella kept their heads down as they approached the berth, where the Horizon's Edge was docked. Documents ready. A bored-looking security officer scanned their identity chips with barely a glance at their faces. "Engineers? Report to Chief Brennan on Deck C. Don't be late for departure briefing." They nodded and moved past, hardly daring to breathe until they were aboard the ship. The cargo vessel was massive compared to the cramped quarters of Carroll Station, with cavernous holds and labyrinthine utility corridors. Following signs, they made their way to Deck C, where they found not Chief Brennan, but a young woman with a knowing smile. "You must be Lena's friends," she said quietly. "I'm Kay, second engineer. The chief knows nothing about you, and that's how it'll stay. Your quarters are here." She handed them a key card. "Keep to yourselves, do the work assigned, and we'll all get along fine." "Thank you," Marcus said. "We appreciate the risk you're taking." Kay shrugged. "Lena saved my life once. I owe her more than this." She glanced at a chronometer on her wrist. "Departure in 40 minutes. Get settled. Then report to engineering for a standard briefing with the rest of the crew. Act like you belong, and no one will question it." She left them to find their quarters, which turned out to be a small but private cabin with a double bunk and minimal amenities. It was still twice the size of Marcus's quarters on Carroll Station, and infinitely more comfortable than the abandoned hydroponics bay. Sella sat on the lower bunk, running her hands over the clean bedding. "I can't believe we made it this far." "We're not clear yet," Marcus cautioned, checking that the cabin door was securely locked. "Not until we're well away from the station. But we will be soon." Sella looked up at him, hope in her dark eyes, for perhaps the first time since he'd met her. "We're really leaving." Marcus felt a strange lightness in his chest, a sensation he eventually recognized as hope, mirroring hers. "Yes," he said, "we're really leaving." The departure announcement came precisely on schedule. They felt the subtle vibration of the engines engaging, the slight shift as docking clamps released. Through the small viewport in their cabin, they watched as Carroll Station slowly receded, its hulking form gradually diminishing until it was just another point of light among the stars. Only then did Marcus allow himself to relax, sinking onto the bunk beside Sella. "It's done," he said quietly. "We're away." Sella leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "What happens now?" "Now we work our passage," Marcus replied. 3 months to the outer rim, plenty of time to plan our next move." "Our next move," Sella repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." Marcus turned to face her, taking her hands in his. "Sella, I want you to know that once we reach the rim, you're free to go your own way. I don't expect anything from you. You don't owe me anything." She studied their joined hands for a long moment before meeting his gaze. "What if I want to stay with you?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Marcus swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to push away the possibility of connection, of vulnerability. "Then I'd be honored," he finally said. "But the choice is yours, always." Sella reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "You gave me back my choice when you opened your door, when no one else would." She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "I choose this. Us. Whatever comes next." The kiss that followed was different from the one they'd shared in the station. Not a desperate ruse, but a deliberate choice. Gentle and unhurried. When they parted, Marcus felt something shifting inside him, like a door, long closed, finally swinging open. "We should get to engineering," he said reluctantly. "For the briefing." Sella nodded, but neither of them moved immediately. They sat together a moment longer, savoring the quiet victory of their escape, the simple miracle of being alive and free and together. The 3 months aboard Horizon's Edge passed with surprising swiftness. Marcus and Sella settled into the rhythm of ship life, working their assigned shifts in engineering, keeping to themselves during off hours. The crew, a diverse mix of species from across the galaxy, asked few questions and expected few answers, a common courtesy among those who traveled the far reaches of space. Their duties were straightforward enough: maintaining the backup life support systems, monitoring power distribution to the cargo holds, performing routine diagnostics on navigation equipment. For Marcus, it was familiar work, simpler than the constant crisis management of Carroll Station. For Sela, it was a return to skills long unused, a reclaiming of competence after years of being valued only for what could be taken from her. They shared everything: their small cabin, their meals in the crew mess, their quiet conversations late into the artificial night. Slowly, piece by piece, they exchanged the stories of their lives before. Marcus spoke of his sister Emily, of her laugh and her stubbornness, and her unwavering belief in his abilities. Sela described her home island on Vathar, the flying fish that glimmered like living jewels in the morning sun, the sound of rain on the dome of her family's dwelling. In the privacy of their cabin, they also shared comfort, finding in each other's arms a solace neither had expected to find again. Their intimacy developed naturally, without pressure or expectation. Touches that lingered, kisses that deepened, the gradual exploration of bodies becoming familiar territory. Sela's iridescent skin glowed with a subtle luminescence in moments of passion, a trait of her species that Marcus found endlessly fascinating. As they approached the outer rim, they began discussing their options for settlement. The ship would make planetfall at New Taiga, a frontier colony with minimal alliance presence and a reputation for asking few questions of newcomers. Their forged documentation would be sufficient to establish residency, and both their skills would be valuable in a developing colony. "We could find work in the terraforming operation," Marcus suggested, as they lay together in their bunk, the ship's night cycle dimming the lights to simulate darkness. "They always need environmental engineers." "Or the hydroponics farms," Sela added, tracing patterns on his chest. "I miss growing things." "We could do both. Find a place on the outskirts, build something of our own." The idea of permanence, of roots, was both terrifying and exhilarating after years of deliberate impermanence. Sela was quiet for a long moment. "I've been feeling strange lately," she finally said. "Different." Marcus propped himself up on one elbow, concern evident in his expression. "Different how? Are you ill?" "No, not ill. Just different." She took his hand and placed it low on her abdomen. I think life has begun here." The words took a moment to register, and when they did, Marcus felt as though all the air had been sucked from the cabin. "You mean you're pregnant?" "Yes." Sela watched his face carefully. "It's rare between our species, almost impossible without medical intervention, but not entirely impossible. It seems." "A child," Marcus whispered, his hand still resting on her abdomen, though there was nothing yet to feel. "Our child. Is this something you want?" Uncertainty crept into Sela's voice. "I know we never discussed—" Marcus silenced her with a kiss, gentle but fervent. "Yes," he said when they parted. "Yes, it's something I want, with you, if you want it too." The smile that illuminated Sela's face was like sunrise after the longest night. "I do, more than anything." They held each other in the dim light of their cabin, contemplating the new life that had begun against all odds. A child of two worlds, born of an improbable meeting, an open door, an act of compassion that had cascaded into love. "New Taiga," Marcus said softly. "A new beginning, for all of us." "Home," Sela replied, the word carrying all the weight of her journey, all the hope of their shared future. "We'll make it home." 2 days before planetfall, Marcus found Sela at the viewport in their cabin, staring out at the approaching world of New Taiga. From orbit, it appeared as a swirl of blue oceans and emerald land masses, with the geometric patterns of settlement visible even from space, the regular grids of agricultural zones, the concentrated glow of the main colony. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, coming to stand beside her. "Yes." Sela leaned into him as his arm circled her waist. "I never thought I'd see a new world like this. As a free person, making my own choice to be here." Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple. I have something for you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, a data crystal hanging from a simple chain. What is this? Sella asked as he placed it in her palm. Our story, Marcus replied. Everything that happened, from the moment you knocked on my door. I recorded it, so our child will know how we found each other, how we became a family. Tears welled in Sella's dark eyes as she closed her fingers around the crystal. Marcus, I want them to know that sometimes the most important choice we make is simply to open a door. He touched her face gently. To let someone in, even when every instinct says to stay safe, stay hidden, stay alone. Sella hung the crystal around her neck, where it nestled against her collarbone. Neither home, nor clothes, nor hope, she whispered, until a human opened the door and said, Stay forever inside. Is that from something? Marcus asked. An old Vathari saying about finding sanctuary. Sella's hand moved to rest on her abdomen, where their child grew. About finding where you belong. As the ship began its descent toward New Taiga, Marcus held Sella close, feeling the warmth of her against him, the solidity of her presence. For 7 years, he had been running from his past, hiding in the forgotten corners of Carroll Station, fixing broken things while leaving his own life in pieces. Now, somehow, he had found his way to a future he'd never dared imagine. One with connection, with purpose, with love. All because he had opened a door. All because, when a stranger knocked, he had chosen to answer.